So, I'm here to talk to you about the new EDUQAS Media Studies A-Level, not AS, specification, and I'm going to be particularly focusing in this video on Component 2, which, quick glance at my notes reminds me, is called Media Forms and Products in Depth. The particular aspect of that's a paper that will involve you, 2.5-hour paper, involving looking at 3 questions, each question on a pair of media texts from different industry contexts or different historical contexts, or contrasting in some way in terms of the audience that they're appealing to. I'm going to look at the magazine aspect of this particular paper, and that is mainstream and alternative media. In another video, you will find me wittering about the February 1965 edition of Women's Realm magazine, which is the mainstream selection. This particular video, I'm going to be looking at the February/March 2016 magazine Huck, which is the set product for the alternative media aspect of this particular question. So it's a paper in which, as I say, you will have 3 questions to look at. Those questions could be in one of 2, they will be in one of 2 formats. There's the extended response 30-mark essay question, or it could be a question that's split across 2, probably 15-mark questions, possibly a 5 and 25, a 10 and a 20, who knows, which, if it's that format, likelihood is that each half of the question will get you to focus on one particular product. Now, quick word about something called something you might have heard of, the theoretical framework. What this is all about is the approach to media texts that EDUQAS, advising and encouraging us to follow as we study all the texts in preparation for this examination. The theoretical framework is not to be confused with all those theorists, those many theorists, the Clay Shirkys, the Bell Hooks, the Judith Butlers, the Paul Gilroys, etc., etc., and that mob whose names and ideas you've been probably busy grappling with over the last few weeks and months. The theoretical framework is the way in which we need to think about media text, the perspective we need to come at media text from. So I'm going to distill that down to RAIL. R for representation, A for audience, I for industry, and L for media language. In other words, the aspects of a text, how representations are constructed, how the audience are targeted, how the audience are likely to use and respond to that particular text. All industry matters, the production context, production values, etc., together with the media language, of course, that allows meaning to be constructed. And the other aspect of that theoretical framework that we really need to pay close attention to is the context, and that can be the economic, social, historical, political, cultural, tragicomic. All of those different contexts need to be considered as we think about these publications. Women's Realm, published by IPC, February 1965, is the mainstream offering. Huck is very much the independent offering. One of the 2, actually, for the price of 1 theorist that you've probably been getting to know is Curran and Seaton. They originally talked about the newspaper and the news production, but their ideas have been kind of extrapolated and applied across the media and related to media industries. And what they essentially tell us is that large media corporations and conglomerates, those that experience the benefits of horizontal and vertical integration, they are driven by the pursuit of profit and power. What they tell us is that those companies are likely to, reproduce the popular. They are not going to take risks. They are not going to, introduce things to the market that are not going to be economically viable. They want success, and while there are exceptions, of course, to this, generally speaking, success comes from reproducing conventions and generic formulas. Alternative media is where we need to look for alternatives. Kerman and Seaton tell us that if we are to see a more diverse range of voices, of representations, of ideas within the media marketplace, then we need to open up access to a whole range of media producers. And that is where TCO come in. TCO stands for the Church of London. They are a publisher / content creating agency. They're very much kind of hipster East London incarnate. If you have a look at their website, and if you're doing this exam of course, you're going to have a look at their website, you will find, and again, quick glance at the notes, that they style themselves as being inspired by radical youth culture. As well as producing Huck magazine, they also produce the very cool film magazine Little White Lies, and they also make a whole range of content for premium brands like Levi's and Nike. And what they're essentially doing for those brands is they're an agency that prides themselves on tapping into the values and the ideas of a millennial audience, that audience that are obviously so sought after and so elusive for a lot of brands. TCO think that they've got your number if you're part of that group, and they can therefore know how to appeal to you and sell that wisdom to big brands. There's a definite whiff of the Clash's famous turning rebellion into money line about this whole thing, and we see that in the pages of Huck. There is the commodification of rebellion at large very much in this particular publication. That's something we may refer back to. Huck started out life as a surfing magazine. It's diversified into something, a general lifestyle magazine for young people with a very global outlook, very much concerned with youth subcultures of the skateboarding, heavy metal, joining a all-female militia variety. Let's dive into the actual content of the magazine, or let's at least land on the front cover. And it's fair to say that we are not in Kansas anymore. In fact, we're in Kurdistan. I'll hold it up here, but obviously you're going to see other images of this. On the front cover, we get an image of a documentary image of a female fighter on the plains of Kurdistan / Syria. Apologies for any geographical errors there. You can see the costume, the army fatigues, the rifle slung across her shoulder. She's giving us direct gaze to the camera. We often use that as shorthand for connotations of empowerment and confidence. There's nothing really confident and bold about her look. There's a nervousness and anxiety, I think, in her facial expression. Not unsurprising, she's in the middle of a battlefield, and someone could have a telescopic lens, trained on her. So I'm not surprised that she's looking slightly apprehensive there. We also get the cover line: "We live in a world where women are dominated by men. We are here to take control of our own future." One of the theorists that I'm sure you've been thinking about is Bell Hooks, who of course argues that feminism should not be reduced to a lifestyle option. It's not a t-shirt slogan, it's not an Instagram bio or a few empowering slogans on your Twitter feed. It is a full-on political commitment, and there is nothing more politically committed than taking arms against a sea of patriarchal oppression in order to end it. Quick shout out to the Hamlet buffs for that one. Bottom of the page, we get some of the introduction to content within the magazine, the names of Henry Rollins, David Bowie, Pussy Riot, plus features on Iraq metal and Mongolia skate. Again, global perspective, very niche subcultures that are being covered here. We don't get any of the kind of imperatives, there's no hyperbole, there's none of that second person stuff. All those taglines and tricks that are used to scream at you from the front of magazines to urge you to buy. This is very, very minimalist, very kind of understated in its approach and in its production values. What you can also see, talking of production values on that front cover, is that this particular issue would set you back a not insignificant £6. So that's fairly expensive cost of the publication, but this is not presented to you as a disposable magazine. This is something collectible. This is something with high production values. The paper stock is really high, really good quality paper. The layouts, they are sort of minimalistic, they're stylish, they're cool. They're everything you'd expect to find from a certain kind of very cool alternative into the magazine itself. And EDUQAS have very kindly, very conveniently directed us to a number of articles that offer us a really excellent sample of the content of the magazine as a whole. One of those is the 8-page Ockland's Angels feature that is, of course, linked to the the female fighters front cover. This article, it's accompanied again by very journalistic, real images of women on the front line. These are, and it's again very important to note, these are not your studio-based, airbrushed, photoshopped, tweaked, glamorized, objectified, therefore to appeal to the male gaze images that we might expect to see of women within the media. These are very much raw, real images of women in action on the front line or bonding with each other, quite dirty, dusty landscapes. Nothing glamorous, nothing, aspirational about these particular images. The article begins by introducing us by this very poetic detail of an unfolded, colourful scarf on the passenger seat of a dusty pickup truck to Sisek Direk, who is a female martyr, sadly lost her life in the pursuit of a free Kurdistan, as well as a gender equality and an end to the oppression of women. So we get interviews with some of the estimated 15,000 women and girls who have signed up and been enlisted to this particular struggle. There's a focus on the sense of unity and community amongst these women. Again, it gives us a sense of values and a story and a narrative that you're not that likely to hear in the mainstream media. And this article, it doesn't simply glorify Sisek Direk's death and the death of others who've sacrificed their lives in the pursuit of this freedom. It speaks to her mother, her sisters, who are very obviously grieving, very moving, speak very movingly about their loss and their sense of of ongoing and sadness at their experiences. The magazine doesn't just want to see us straightforwardly as something heroic. It offers us a more nuanced, complicated version of the issues and the story. Quick word on the title that they've chosen for the article, though: Ockland's Angels, with its intertextual link to the seminal 70s TV show Charlie's Angels and the subsequent reboots of that on the big screen. Could be argued there is a hint of patriarchy there, a hint of female submission and subservience to male authority, although it could equally be argued that there is enough evidence elsewhere in the article and within the images that accompany it to tell us that these are not simply women who are submitting to the demands of some male authority figure. Definitely no escaping the fact that this is an article that chimes in very much with bell hooks, ideas about feminism, and that would be, I think, a fruitful area a fruitful theory to apply when considering this particular article. So on to a second feature in the magazine, this one exploring skate culture in the Molenbeek district of Brussels in Belgium. And this was a place that, in the wake of the Paris attacks, became synonymous with terrorist activity. It was generally seen as a kind of a breeding ground, a hotbed of terrorist activity. And again, this is an article that offers a counter-narrative, that we hear voices, we see images of people who generally speaking, would be denied access to the media. So we get interviews with 21-year-old Fatima Chakri, a hijab-wearing skateboarder, not the most common representation of female Muslim identity in the media. We get an interview with Rami Tahir, an openly atheist, lapsed Muslim 19-year-old. And what's really interesting about this piece is that these young people are presented as being just like us. They dress like us. They skateboard like us. Well, maybe like you, not like me, but you know what I'm saying. They look for spaces to be together where they can create and graffiti and make music like us. Another of the theorists that you'll have been thinking about is Paul Gilroy and his ideas about ethnicity and post-colonialism. Gilroy has argued very, convincingly that media representations of ethnicity are often constructed around a sense of otherness. There is an us versus them binary that is created in many media narratives. What we get here in the pages of Huck is not us versus them, it's simply us. We are reminded of not of differences between ourselves and these young people interviewed, but of similarities. So it counters dominant narratives within the media. It offers us representations that are more diverse, that are more challenging. In other words, it does what Cohen and Seaton argue alternative media would do. It also offers us something different in terms of representations, just in the way that Andrew Gauntlet, in his theories of representation, argues that more modern media texts are likely to. And we see something very similar at work in another of the key articles, which is the extracts from the Beyond Binary series of profiles within the pages of the magazine. These are articles, of course, that interview and offer us images of people who, refuse to be caged and categorised by, some of the restrictive definitions of gender and sexuality. It embraces something more diverse and fluid. So we get interviews and images of Jacob Tabaya and Felix Arabia. Again, the kind of voices that we don't often hear in the media. And very, importantly, I think that these people are allowed to speak for themselves. They give us first-person, first-hand accounts of their experiences, and they're allowed to, create their own identity and define for themselves who they are. So another really interesting piece with excellent links to say, Gauntlet, Cohen and Seaton, some of the theorists that we've been looking at as part of the course. The brands that do advertise, we get companies like Squarespace, the web creation tools. We get a really interesting double-page advert for G-Star Raw Jeans, the kind of hip, aspirational brand that you might expect to see advertising in a magazine like Huck. The representation of femininity that we get in that advert, very bold, confrontational, costume, jeans, leather jacket that is not, stereotypically feminine, but there is no escaping the fact that this is an advertisement. There is a beauty standard in operation here. So that's Huck, high on production values, a very stylish magazine that offers something challenging to prevailing media texts. As I said earlier, the theoretical framework means we have to be prepared to answer questions on any aspect of this publication, from the company behind it to the magazine itself and the representations within it, to how the audience are being asked to respond to the particular magazine. We've so far seen 2 sample assessment questions, both in the 30-mark extended response mode. The first of these was lifted a quote directly from Andrew Gauntlet. Here it is. We no longer get singular, straightforward messages about ideal types of male and female identities, and it invited you to evaluate the validity of that claim in the light of these 2 magazines and the historical context. Second sample assessment question that we've seen had more industry focus and asked how significant are economic factors in the magazine industry. So it's getting to think about vertical horizontal integration, the difference between independents and mainstream publishers. Again, quick application of Curran and Seaton there. Maybe the digital convergence in the modern media age. Changing patterns of readership as we see the alternative print sector, the independent print sector, very healthy, thriving scene where you can find kind of niche publications that offer something very different to what you can find online. The internet, of course, as we know, is a hot take kind of place. It's very rapid response, quite ephemeral, quite transitory content that's being produced. The content that we get in Huck magazine is much more, I wouldn't say timeless exactly, but more reflective. So that article about Molenbeek, it's not an instant knee-jerk response. It's something, something more detailed and more considered. And quite interestingly, in terms of digital convergence, if you go to the magazine's website or to the YouTube channel, then you can find a documentary film that features many of those interviewed within the article. So those are the questions that we've seen so far. But what we will see on the actual exam, we will find out at some point in June 2019 for the first time, and then 12 months after that, for as long as they see fit not to change the specification and meddle with things again. So that was Huck magazine. I'm going to be back with more of these videos. Apologies that it's very long, but new specification calls for quite a lot of new information. Hopefully you watched to the very end. Mum.